Coming up on today's episode of the Salesman podcast.
We have to be really honest with ourselves about what are the problems that we're the best in the world at solving.
Hello Sales Nation, I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman podcast, and welcome to another episode of the show. On today's show we have Dave Brock, one of my favourite guests, and we're diving into both why you and I, because I still sell the ad space on this very podcast that you're listening to, why you and I both are the biggest differentiators for our products in our market. It seems like a big claim. It seems like a slightly unbelievable claim until you get into the facts, and Dave shares his thoughts on this in today's episode. If you want to learn more about Dave, head over to partnersinexcellenceblog.com. If you are a sales manager listening, if you've got plans and hopes and dreams to get into that world of management, I highly recommend his newest book, Sales Manager Survival Guide. It's available on Amazon. The book, everything else that we talk about, is available in the show notes of this episode over at salesman.red/178. And with that all said, let's jump straight in. Hey Dave, and welcome to the Salesman podcast.
Well, it's great to talk to you again. I enjoyed our last session. Thank you.
I did as well, hence why you're back on, because I feel like you've got a lot of value to give on this topic in particular as well. And to jump straight in a market, in a global market that's becoming even more and more globalized as time goes on, where B2B products are becoming more and more commoditized. Do you agree with this statement that sales professionals are perhaps the biggest differentiator between products in 2016?
Absolutely. I think it's the sales professional and the resources the sales professional brings to bear from their organizations or even from their partners to really help customers address their business problems. So it's less the product and the solution, though that's part of it, but the real differentiation and the real value we create is how we engage the customer through their problem solving and buying process.
And to again ask a massively leading question, because I know where we're going to go with this. Should we be personally, as the sales professional, everyone listening to this show right now, should they be looking to solve problems for the prospects beyond the pain points that their product solves, or should they be just sticking to what their product was intended to relieve?
I think I'll probably take this on a slight maybe left turn. Is that what we in our organizations, not just the sales function, but the whole organizations, we have to be really honest with ourselves about what are the problems that we're the best in the world at solving, and who has those problems, because that then becomes, our sweet spot of where our messages resonate, where we can really help the customers. So as a salesperson, I want to find the people with those problems. So if you start thinking, am I a charitable organization? For instance, I have people calling me all the time and they're asking me about their problems, but they're problems that I'm not the best in the world at solving. They're interesting problems. I have a point of view, but I'm not the person that can create the real difference for them. And I don't want to waste their time. More importantly, I don't want to waste my time because I'm not going to get anything from it. So there always is that kind of connection between what problems are we looking for in our customers, and are those the problems that we can solve? And by doing that, we create real value from them. So my answer is a little bit vague. It's the broader problem, but the context of which, how do we contribute to helping them do this?
And what do you do, Dave, if you're listening to this right now, you're nodding, that sounds fantastic, but my product isn't really the best in the world at solving anything, and neither is my company. What do you do in that circumstance?
You are the best to somebody, and you do make a difference. I mean, and the thing is again, what we have to do is start saying, it's not so much about the product per se. I think it was I've forgotten it, but there's somebody that has this extended product point view. So it's not the product or the solution itself; it's the capabilities of the company, it's the capabilities of the people in the company, the capabilities of that network, is all that you bring to the solution. So, for instance, I started my career selling for IBM. IBM had great products, but they were trailing edge products. There are much more exciting, much more advanced products, but the reason people bought from us is because of our ability to really understand the customer's business and help them take not the greatest, sexiest product in the world, but to apply that product in a meaningful way that produce business results. So, when we start focusing on the product and we start doing lists of, and the most destructive things companies can do on their website is do features list with all the check boxes. Here are all the features that we have, here are all the check boxes we have, and so on and so forth, because now they're positioning in their buyers' minds and in their own salespeople's minds is it's about features and functions, and he who has the longest list with the most check boxes wins. Well, in reality, that's totally irrelevant to the customer.
And how do you know? This seems like a simple question, but I've never totally wrapped my head around it from a real practical standpoint. How do you know what the customer values?
You ask them. It's as simple as that. So you say, well, Dave, that's a little bit too trite. I haven't even talked to the customer yet.
So let me just stop you there, because that's what I wanted to get into, of how we can add more value over the buying process, and then where we should be asking a question like that.
So for instance, let's walk through the buying process and say, I don't even know who these people are in the company. I know that I know, number one, that they fit my sweet spot. So we know enough about the industry, the market, the company to know that we solve problems for people like this. Whether it's the persona within the company, whether it's the right type of enterprise, the right type of industry. That's this whole thing of what problems are we the best in the world at solving and who has those problems. So I have that kind of picture or that image of my sweet spot, my ideal customer. So now I haven't even met those people yet, but I know the industry, I know them and their peers, and I know what problems they have, what opportunities they have. I know what's happening in that industry. So now I'm very, very informed and can engage them. And so I reach out to somebody that I don't know. I don't know for sure that they have this issue, but this is where I can be provocative. This is where I can come and educate them on issues they may not be aware of. Our customers today are time poor. They're overwhelmed. They're overloaded. They don't have time to do anything but do their job. So they're kind of nose to the grindstone. And so often they become blind to what's happening around them or what should be happening around them. So this is the role of the salesperson. In part of it is creating value is, pull your head up, look out and see what's happening within your company, look out and see what's happening in the industry. And here's an opportunity for you.
And what's a practical example of that? Because again, I think it's something like that is quite easy to say, to absorb, but then for the salesperson listening now, on their way to the next sales meeting, how could they use that? And I've got a couple of examples I could probably give as well.
Well, some of the classic, they're fairly trite examples are, if I'm calling somebody in the car rental business, or I'm calling somebody in, God forbid, the taxi cab business, is, I'd say, have you heard of this thing called Uber? This thing is disrupting your industry. How do we develop some things that allow you to compete in that environment? Or, you go to the hotels and say, have you heard of this thing called Airbnb and what they're trying to do and so on? So, we become students of seeing what's happening in our company, in our customers' industries, what's potentially disrupting them. And so there are examples like that all over the place. Tom Peters, I think in the last interview, we talked about, managing by walking around. Well, I believe in sales by walking around. What you do is walk around kind of, at least figuratively, your customer site. Look at what they're doing. I remember some years ago, I was the junior salesperson in a very large banking territory, and I said, all the senior guys are covering the data centers, and I still had a quota. How do I figure out what to sell? So I started walking around through the departments. I started just watching how people worked, and I said, oh, gee, I can simplify this process. And oh, by the way, sell a $20 million computer along the way. And I'd sit down with the executives and I said, do you realize, some things that aren't great about your process? And the reason I knew they weren't great is I saw other banks doing that. Mm-hmm. So there's some things, there's a concept I like calling kind of your flagship or lead customers. Who are the movers and shakers if you're selling into the banking industry? Who are the thought leaders and movers and shakers? What are they doing? Hopefully we've done something to help them. So now I can take that example to everybody else and get them to think differently, start educating them and engaging them in these problems and thinking differently about their business.
That's fantastic. So you've just very eloquently described a process that I used to go through in my medical device days that I probably didn't realize at the time how useful it was. And that was that I would have these surgeons who'd be world leaders, and there's a guy up in Bradford near me in particular. I would ask him to solve other customers' problems, whether that be that they're having trouble with management and getting funding and that kind of thing, whether it be procedural problems. And I've even brought some of the smaller accounts to him, and he was happy. You're stroking his ego, of course, as this alpha surgeon, to take people under his wing and to mentor them a little bit, or from afar, essentially, after that initial meeting anyway. And then they get value added from that. And that was me as an individual, not to do with the company that was adding that value. So I think this is a topic that is applicable to more people than perhaps they even realize. And you mentioned people are time poor and people are overloaded. I think these are two key things that are going to become more and more important as the years go on, but specifically as technology and tools are being thrown on us and bombarded with new bleeps and messages from watches, excuse me, from eventually be from contact lenses, God knows where else that we're going to be getting beeps and notifications from. As an individual now in 2016, what can we do to help our customers very practically again, to help them save time and to, I guess, reduce their stress and their overload?
So I don't know that there's an easy answer to that. I think, part of it is simplification, helping them make sense of what's going on in their lives. And so we're not dealing with every customer in the world. We're only dealing with the customers with whom we have some level of expertise. We know what they do. We know how we can help them be better. And so how do we help them, one, sort through the clutter? So for instance, maybe they've considered we have to change. We have to do something new. There's an opportunity to grow. There's an opportunity to increase productivity. There's an opportunity to decrease costs. There's an opportunity to better serve our customers. So, we're engaging with them. They're thinking about this, but they're overwhelmed and overloaded with messages from all our competitors, from everybody else. And how do they sort through this overload and overwhelm? Well, we can sit down with them and start thinking, how are you going to buy? What are the things that are most important to you? One of the richest exercises I've ever done, and one of the most powerful, is I sit down with a buying group and I say, what's important to you in this thing? What are you trying to achieve? And guess what? They all come up with the top 3 or 4 things. And then I say, tell me more. Then I say, tell me more, and tell me more. And I make a game out of this. I say, if it's a group of 5 people, I say, give me 50 things that you're trying to change or do different in this project. Tell me 50 things about that are important to you about this issue, and I make a game out of it and say, you can't stop till you get 50, because what happens is, we want to get everything out and we want to exhaust those things, not the top 3 or 4 things, but we want them to really think about what they're trying to do. And the problem is most of the time when we engage our customers or ourselves, we don't really think about what we're trying to do. We deal with the 2 or 3 surface most urgent things, and then we move on to the next 2 or 3 and next 2 or 3, but we really aren't accomplishing things and really looking at what is it that we're trying to achieve. So that process of what are the 50 things, then prioritizing them, all of a sudden they think, nobody's ever asked me this before. I've never had the chance to think deeply about these issues. And some of the times they forget things because they're not experts about this stuff. And you have the opportunity to say, have you ever considered this? Have you ever considered that? So on and so forth. And so now you get them in a space of a very short period of time to really understand what they're trying to do, to simplify and crystallize in their mind, not deal with this bombarding of different messages and different things that each salesperson is trying to inflict on them. But now they know as a group what they want to do, what's important between all of them, not each individual. And now they start having a path forward. They have some clarity of what they're looking for.
Tell me here, Dave, sorry to interrupt. Before you move on from this point, because I want to understand it better. The customer, as we've talked about, they are time sensitive. They want things simplifying. Do we have to go through this process of discovery of 50 things to then, I guess you've got to take a step backwards, take 2 steps forward to simplify it? Or is the value in, and I might be totally off here, but is the value in us trying to, it's the worst way to put it, but to tell them what they need? And if they're so stressed, and if you are if you're reliable and you're well known in the industry and they trust you, is that a way to add value in that they can just take all the work out of their hands, give it to you, and you've done it, you've simplified it, and you've solved that time constraint there?
The right answer is it depends, but the reality is until they own it for themselves, they don't own it. So as expert as we are, there's been so many times where I've seen, because I'm an expert in certain areas, I've seen these companies are really troubled on this. If they only changed that, and I can go in and I can say, here's my reputation, here's similar companies that we've worked with, here are the results we've produced. We are experts, and they recognize we are experts. But until they see and own the issue for themselves, they won't do anything about it, regardless of how smart and how informed we are. And I think that's too much of what salespeople do. They do recognize this. I was just dealing with somebody last week, and she had this sales situation that just wasn't moving forward. And she said, here's their problem. And you put dollars and cents to the problem, and it's a big problem. And I said, has it come out of their mouths yet? And she said, no. And I said, until that problem comes out of their mouths, until they say, this is unacceptable, we have to do something about it, everything else is just wishful thinking or wasted effort.
Brilliant. Okay. The problems and the issues that we should be trying to uncover and again get them to realize it. I totally appreciate that. Should they be financial business problems of, if we bring in our product or service, you will save X amount of time, you'll save X amount of money per month, per year? Or should we also be looking at how we can better that individual prospect, that person, how we can better their career, how we can help them out in other more personal ways as well?
Well, there are a few dimensions to this. One is they'll define the problems they have, and if we're talking to the right people, they're the problems we can solve. There are a couple of things. There's the business aspect to the problem, which is how do we improve productivity? How do we improve quality? How do we, accelerate revenue growth? Whatever that might be, there's the business aspect that, we're in our jobs and we're measured on doing these things. There's the personal aspect, which actually tends to be the driver behind a lot of these decisions and a lot of these attention, is how do I get some sanity in my life? I'm overworked, I'm overwhelmed, I have too many things on my plate and I'm not doing them. I'm not getting home in the evening for my kids' soccer games. My boss is on my back. I want my boss off my back. I want to get a bonus. I want to get a promotion. Those are the things that concern us as human beings. As a salesperson, we have to touch on all those things. And too often, I don't think we recognize and leverage what drives people as human beings. We have our KPIs that we want to get, but we have other things that fulfill us in life. And that's basically, we hear a lot of people saying, people make a decision based on their heart and emotion and then rationalize it based on the business aspect of it. I'm not sure that that's really the case, but I think it's this combination of are they trying to achieve personally in terms of sanity and control in their lives and what they want to do and what they're trying to achieve in their jobs as a business. The other aspect of it is, you asked about the business aspect. Whatever we do in the problems they solve, they won't get approval to move forward with their project unless they connect the dots somehow to something that's important to somebody higher up the food chain. So if we're seeing, for instance, in large B2B things, even though we have a high sense of urgency, even though we have a fantastic business case, if it doesn't contribute to the top 3 strategic objectives of the corporation, they aren't going to get funding for it. Even if it may be in their budget, they will not be allowed to proceed further. So they have to connect the dots of the problems they're solving in their organizations to the problems that senior executives think are important, and then and do that. And a lot of times they don't know that they should be doing that, and they don't know how to be doing it. God forbid they sell something. The last thing they want to do is be perceived as salespeople. So we can help them think about how they get what they want and how they convince management to get what they want.
So is that a framework we should all be aiming for with essentially every B2B deal that we do, that we are ticking corporate objectives, we're ticking the prospects' objectives business-wise and what they're targeted in their job, but then we're going that step deeper and we're trying to free up their time, we're trying to make things simpler for them. Is there anything else I'm missing there, or are those the 3 things that every deal we go into, every prospect we are researching for that big sales meeting, they're the things we should be looking at?
I tend to agree with that. I reverse the process, though. First is, how do we understand what they're doing and how do we simplify what they're trying to do? How do we bring sanity into their lives from both a business function point of view and from a personal point of view? We have to be able to help them discover the answers to those questions and how we help them do that first. Once we do that, then we have to say, how does what you want to do now impact what your boss wants to do, what your boss's boss wants to do, what's important to the corporation? If what you want to do isn't important to the corporation, then we have to figure out how to make it important to the corporation. Interestingly, a few years ago, we were involved with a very, very big deal with an American telecom company. The group president chose my client's solution. It was a couple $100 million solution with some implementation and some of that. He chose the solution. We had a great business case and all that. As he went up to the corporate management committee and the board of directors, because of the size of this thing, they denied him. And they denied him because while it was important to him, it didn't fit the top 3 priorities of the company. When we sat down with the group president and his staff and we said, how do we reframe this project to look at how it might contribute to those 3 priorities? We reframed the project. We went back to the corporate executive committee and presented it in that context, and it was immediately approved. So we have to go through that. First, we have to look at what is our customer facing business-wise, personally, how do we simplify and help them do better, help them grow? Once we do that, then how do we help them prove to their management how it contributes to their management's growing and doing better, and their corporations growing and doing better. And until we connect those dots, we won't succeed. So it goes back to, for the loss of a horseshoe, a kingdom was lost. If we make and sell horseshoes, we still impact the kingdom in some sense, even though it may be a small sense.
And I want to dive into and wrap up the show with a thought that I've got here, Dave, of something that is perhaps, well, it's just not talked about in sales, and I feel like it should be. And that is the process of you as the individual salesperson being, whether it's on the phone, Skype, whether it's in person, being there, present, and just able to chat and talk to and bring all these things out of the prospect themselves. So the process of you being there, listening, the value that can add, rather than what you get at the end of it, which is actionable insights, which you can frame and put into marketing speak and put into value propositions. But do you feel that there's value in you just taking the time to speak with someone in a world that is constantly, well, I'll email you instead, I will do this instead, I'll set a 5-minute meeting rather than a 15-minute sit down and conversation? Is in 2016, is the value for the salesperson just to take a little bit more time in their sales meetings and just be really present with their prospects?
I think that's really important because, in spite of everything, unless we're doing transactions through Amazon or electronic kind of transactions where computers can talk to each other and be buddies and buy and sell, this is a people business. And, we have to connect with people at a person at a one-to-one level. And so we have to take the time to connect with them over whatever means is their preferred communication channel. More often, it's at least voice to voice, or visually, through a video call like we're doing right now, or even a face-to-face meeting. Unless we're connecting with other human beings, we aren't really establishing that relationship, and we aren't really understanding what drives them. So that human touch is always, I think, probably the last mile, if you will, in developing that relationship and solving the customer's problem. It's that last touch in saying, I care, and I care about you, the individual, your company. And, oh, by the way, I care about doing things together so we can mutually be successful.
And do you feel that, or do you know perhaps from data, that human connection is happening more, less, or for the top B2B sales professionals is just the same and will always be the same?
I think what we're seeing is almost a bifurcation of the market. Is there's some things, as many transactions, as many purchases as can be automated and done untouched by human hands. We're seeing a huge migration to that because it's as a buyer, it's much more effective and efficient for me. But as I start looking at complex problems, as I start thinking about my business differently, the moment I have more than one person in my company involved in making that decision, then I'm entering into a complex process. And my likelihood of being successful in solving that problem within my own company it declines the more that people are involved. So now it becomes a people-to-people thing. It's how the buying group interacts with each other, how they align. They don't know how to do that. Salespeople can help them do that. How I, as a salesperson, connect with each of those people and connect with the group. So the bifurcation is that if it's a simple transaction and so on and so forth, more of those will go to automated or semi-automated, much more efficient processing, and that's what's right. But as we start looking at complex decisions, and complex means more than one person involved in the decision-making process, then that human interaction is vital.
And do you think that will ever change?
never, one learns never to say never. It'll never change, and things like this.
Well,
one
let me
good
rephrase it then. Could that change with things like basic artificial intelligence, bots? I don't know, an algorithm that can go into a company's data, the back end, the customer base, and come out with a recommendation rather than a salesperson trying to do it through speaking with people. And it's a super crazy high level question that won't be answered for 30 years, I'm sure. But is it something that could be automated?
I own an AI company, and so we happen to have some good insight into AI, and AI offers a lot of things. I think in the coming years, 5 years, 10 years, what AI and those types of tools do is they increase the ability to focus the discussion. They increase the ability to have a well-informed discussion with the right people at the right time about the right issues at levels of depth and insight that we couldn't otherwise achieve. I think the real promise of AI is that intensity of focus and intensity of the quality of the conversation. What happens 10 years from now, whether my AI engine talks to your AI engine and we solve other companies' problems, well, then that says something really interesting for employment. We don't need people. Mm-hmm. So, God forbid that things will change. We always need people, and how we engage them will change. But I think right now the tools like AI offer huge promise in focus, depth, and intensity of thinking and discussion around solving problems. But it's people that'll solve problems.
Amazing. That's the best answer I've had of anyone who's touched on this subject. So I appreciate that, Dave. And I've got one question to ask everyone that comes on the show. You've already answered it, so I'm going to turn it on its head very slightly. And that is, if you could right now, you're speaking to Sales Nation. What is the one piece of advice you'd give everyone on a wide, broad scale of sales? What's the one piece of advice you'd give them to help them improve their ability to sell?
Be curious. Curious is the solution to everything. Curious means I want to find out about my customers. I want to find about my markets and industries. I want to find out what makes businesses tick, what makes people tick, and how I can help them. I want to find out about my own company. I want to find out about my products. I want to find out how to be better about those and where they fit better. So, curiosity may have killed the cat, but curiosity really helps salespeople be better, to grow, and to be more valuable for their customers.
Brilliant. Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Sales Manager Survival Guide, which I've got here in front of me. I've read it over the past few weeks. I really enjoyed it. It's the only sales manager book that I've ever read. I've read a couple of management books, and I got a lot out of it as well from just the perspective of being a salesperson. So tell us a little bit about that and where we can find it.
Oh, thank you. Well, the Sales Manager Survival Guide came out in May. It's available in Amazon, and some other bookstores are picking it up, but primarily through Amazon, either in physical form, paperback, or in Kindle form. It'll be available on iTunes and in Google in the coming weeks. But right now it's Amazon. What I really did is I really focused. I said, where is sales breaking down these days? Where do sales organizations break down? And it's really at the frontline sales manager. The frontline sales manager has the difficult challenge of saying, how do I take these corporate initiatives and how do I translate them into what my team does every single day? So how do I bridge that thing and translate strategy into day-to-day execution and getting each person on the team to perform at the very highest levels? And so you have that frontline manager, and we started seeing frontline managers don't have any tools. They don't have any guides to help them think about what their job is, help them think about how to become better at coaching. How do I integrate coaching in business management? how do I help my team get better? How do I help my organization get better? So that's what we're trying to answer in Sales Manager Survival Guide. Interesting, since it's been out and we've had a couple thousand copies sold already, is that we find people saying, I need to buy some extra copies because I can't let this off my desk. It's I've gone in and seen it dog-eared and highlighted and so on. There's one guy that sent it to me, sent me a note the other day. He says, it's in my backpack all the time because I carry it with me when I'm on the road. I carry it, to customers. It's something I constantly refer to, which is what we intended when I wrote it. So hopefully, and it's not just for sales managers. We were talking earlier, it's, for sales people to decode their managers and how they work more effectively with managers. It's for senior executives to say, how do I work more effectively and how do I support my frontline sales managers? So it's really, I think, while it's focused on the frontline manager, it's a book that I think every sales professional will get some value out of.
Definitely. And I think the words I used to describe it to you before was, if I would have read it 10 years ago, it would have been a really useful resource to make me less of a pain in the arse for my sales manager, because I've always been a pain. I've always delivered on results, but I've always been a pain to manage, and I've always appreciated that.
Well, we don't want to see that happen, Will. That's what makes it so fun. So.
Yeah, well, I keep things entertaining for people. And with that, Dave, I want to thank you for your time, your insights. I'm conscious of time here. Otherwise, I probably could have gone on for another half hour, an hour of this conversation for sure. So we'll have you back on to dive into some of this in more detail in the future for certain. And with that, mate, I want to thank you for your time and your insights. I'm trying not to suck up to you here, but I'm going to say they are genuinely unique from the guests that I have on the show, your insights. And so I appreciate that, mate. And I want to thank you for coming on and joining us on the Salesman podcast.
Well, I'm flattered and always enjoy our conversations, Will. Thanks so much.
And there we have it. Dave, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, mate. I thank you for your insights. Thank you, Sales Nation, as always, for tuning in. There would be no show if it wasn't for you guys. And yeah, you're enabling me to make these shows. I'm learning an awful lot from them, and hopefully you guys are as well. And so with all that said, I'll hit you with another dose of knowledge tomorrow.